Whenever I think about or speak about Black history, I realize that it's more than just celebrating the accomplishments of African American men and women and children. I often think about Claudette Colvin spearheading the Montgomery Montgomery bus boycott. But I also think about the obstacles that we had to acknowledge as African Americans, and we had to go beyond policy and go beyond whatever the cultural norms and to overcome them. As we go on the journey for a better equality and better equity as a person, community, and institutions in the world, we must acknowledge those areas that need to be changed in order for everyone to be treated most decently. Yes, this is the month of soul work. And the soul work begins with ourselves. And I have a couple of really bold statements that I need to make. I'm going to give you some examples of the systems in America. So the first bold statement is every system, all systems that are broken, the underlying cause is racism. I need to repeat that. Every system, all systems that are broken, the underlying cause is racism. Racism is the core of every problem. Racism believes, or racist believes, that if I get $1, that's going to take $1 from you if you're white, which is so far from the truth. Racists want whites to benefit only. It's always that thought of us versus them, divide and conquer. It's time to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So the original sin of America is first, stolen land, second, stolen people, third, stolen labor free or free labor, fourth, stolen ideas from people that were stolen. There must be reconciliation. Racism is the original sin. So the first system that I'm going to talk about is the vision system. You might not know what that is, but I'll explain it to you. Stop looking for what's wrong with everything and look for what is right. Some people look at Black Lives Matter banner and says, they're not the only persons that matter. I don't think that that's what the sign says. Black Lives Matter is a statement. It is not an argument that nobody else matters. I've never seen a sign that says Black Lives Matter only. Of course, none of you have ever said that because you're used. It's a statement. Black Lives Matter, period. Nothing else to that. And then we have a remembering system. Of course, you don't know what that one is either because I made it up. And I've heard this all too often as well. Oh, why don't Black people just forget about it, forget about it, forget about it? But the remembering system is that we remember the Holocaust, we remember 9/11, remember the Parkland shootings, but we can't remember slavery, the brutal and barbaric methods that were used during that time. The violations of the past, the present, and maybe even the future. Unless white people reckon with themselves of the original sin, which is racism. 400 years of slavery, emancipation, Jim Crow, segregation, police brutality, mass incarceration, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So it's hard for us to forget. It would be easier to forget it if it weren't still happening. I'm going to talk about systems now. The educational system in Hawaii. Do you realize that this is the only state, and I'm not arguing if it's a state or not, because Hawaiians don't think that this is part of the United States, but just so that I can just say this, Hawaii is the only state in the nation that does not use property tax for public education. What does that mean exactly? So I'm in the education system. So our teachers really adapt to deal with the varied cultures that are here on the island. Probably not if they're coming from the mainland and from Tennessee or Alabama, Mississippi or whatever. So the school system, the public school system, is always threatening the teachers that they're gonna furlough them or cut their salaries or do something crazy. So that system needs to be repaired. Teachers are mandated to go into a classroom and there's no students in there because of the union saying that they have to go to a classroom. And then the schools are not the safest because there's rumors and there are actually people that have died in the school system here. And it's not really highly publicized. And it's just kind of taken for granted that don't say anything and you don't know anything. And it's putting everyone at risk. We're going to talk about his story. The books, and I love teaching in summer school history. However, the books were written in 1989, over 30 years ago. One of the things that I didn't know, that there were 3 African-American women that were instrumental in John Glenn landing on the moon in 1962. Nowhere was that in the history books. It's time to rewrite the history books. It's time to have history books and not his story books. Eli Whitney did not invent the cotton gin as it says in the history books, but his slave by the name of Black Sam did. In higher education, the systems need to be changed and altered. Nina Simone was overlooked at Juilliard, in which she's a brilliant, brilliant pianist, but she was too dark and her hair was too curly or too kinky. Universities right now are limiting the number of minorities that are accepted in universities. They only want a certain amount of Hispanics, or a certain amount of Blacks, or a certain amount of Asians in these schools per year. And this is, I'm talking about Ivy League schools. They have quotas for minority entrants per year. The employment system needs to be repaired. Minorities are generally the first or the last to be hired and the first fired. And if you have a name that is different and you're African American, you might have the same qualities on your resume. You will not get a call in for an interview. And if you do, 50% will not get a call back for that same job. African Americans are normally not paid as much doing the same work as white men or white women. System that needs to be broken. I admire Boeing. They have a racial equity task force. And Carol Washington says this: standing up for racial justice means intentionally fighting racism and inequity and inequality in all forms. Leading by example in your community and raising awareness about race, discrimination and bias. Boeing is going to continue to do this and do their part in racial equity. It's not a trend. Let's talk about the union system. There has been many situations that white people wouldn't join a union because Black people wanted to join the union for no other reason. And Black people's attitude is, if me up, we come up. If me come up, we come up. There again, divide and conquer. If a Black person wants it, we don't want it. In Hawaii, I have found out recently that the minimum wage for $15 did not pass. And people are living on starvation wages, where they're working 2, 3, 4 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their families' heads. Needs to be broken. The food system needs to be broken. In lower income neighborhoods, rarely do you find a very quality food distribution center like Whole Foods or Down to Earth. It'll always be substandard food quality in communities of color. But you will find a Walmart or Target or whatever. The environmental system needs to be corrected. In Flint, Michigan, for 5 years, they had too much lead in the water. In Los Angeles, you have chemtrails, poor air quality. And Texas, that is really something that needs to be handled. There was one person that said that their bill for one day was $17,000 because they had gotten on an alternative system, but when the prices or there was no electricity or whatever, their bill just soared $17,000. The medical system needs to be repaired. There was a doctor by the name of J. Marion Sims in the 1840s. He was called the father of modern gynecology. He gave slaves hysterectomy without any anesthesia. In 1851, the students claimed that African Americans, they didn't have any pain, nor did they have any anxiety, and that they had a primitive nervous system, and they did not experience pain like white people. In 1932, 600 African American men from Macon County, Alabama, they enlisted in a scientific experiment on syphilis. And we all know what that was all about. They were given syphilis, they didn't treat it, and many died. In 1951, Henrietta Lacks had a tumor removed, and that same year she died. Researchers harvested her cells, and her family never got one dime from any research benefit. In 2016, because we all think that that was then and this is now, in 2016, medical students said that Black patients had thicker skin and they feel less pain. There is such distraught in me having to talk about this sort of thing. Black women are supposed to be strong, so therefore, many times they're misdiagnosed. They have the highest mortality rate, and they're less likely to believe that if they tell their doctor their symptoms and their pain, they're less likely to be believed by the physician. And I have a personal story on this one. Wally had a procedure last year, and on the follow-up, I told the doctor, I said, he's acting a little bit strange and something's not right. So he said, oh, he's all right, you know, just kind of poo-poo. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, anyway, 3 days later, I had to call the ambulance. He was at the hospital for 5 days, and then he ended up being in a rehabilitation hospital for another 5 weeks. Certainly he apologized to me by not listening to me, but at that point, it was a little bit too late. The vaccination distribution system. In New York, there are more outer-towners that are getting vaccinated than Blacks, Hispanics, and New Yorkers are getting. This is due to income and also race. Only 30% of African Americans have a broadband internet system, and that is how you are supposed to make your appointments. There again, racism. In Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, there are very few pharmacies, hospitals, or clinics. So the marginalized communities have to travel, and many times they don't have the means to get anywhere else. So they end up perhaps dying. Like 1.5 times as many people die that are Black people die from COVID than any other race. 3 times hospitalized. Right now, there's only 5.4 that have been vaccinated that are Black people, as opposed to 60% that have been vaccinated and white people have been vaccinated. So this looks like an ethnic cleansing just from not making the vaccination or the vaccine accessible to lower income. I found this pretty shocking that Pfizer gave the previous occupant of the White House $1 million to finance his inauguration. So that made it pretty clear on the reason they were first in being open to distribute their vaccination. The religious system needs definitely repair. Kindness is religion. And it is noted at 11 o'clock on Sundays is the most segregated hour of the week. And then we have the idea that Jesus is white. And that was put into the minds of Black people because there was the intention to always have Black people being inferior and white people being superior. So Jesus was the white demigod. We have that democratic system that needs repairing. The US has never truly had a democracy. So how can you have a father becoming the president, a son becoming the president, and potentially there should have been a brother that was going to be the president, and there to be a democratic system? The system of voting. The Republicans did everything that they possibly could to stop Democrats from voting, but it didn't work. They purged over 200,000 voters in Georgia alone. And in California, they put up counterfeit drop boxes all over in the Black neighborhoods. So the Republicans now are faced with what is called R1. It's For the People Act. It's going to transform anti-corruption and clean election form packages. That's what it's going to be initiated for. It will clean up corruption in Washington, empower American people, and restore faith and integrity to our government, RH. Now there is 165 lawsuits to restrict Democrats from voting. They're getting ready. They don't want the same thing to happen that happened this time, for a Democrat to get in office and the Georgia senators to be Democrat. They do not want this to happen. So in Georgia, what they're doing is they want the polls to be closed on Sundays because the Black preachers there, they have a system that is called souls to the polls. So after church on Sunday, they would go to the poll and vote. So they're wanting to eliminate Sunday being able to vote. Another thing that they're proposing is that people are waiting in line to vote, and some as long as 11 hours, that it will be illegal for you to give them any food or water. And probably not have any porta potties there either. So we must push to eradicate racism and dismantle this system of oppression that has been so long in existence. There's the postal system. How could one person ruin something that has been established for a couple of 100 years, maybe, the postal system? But they calculated, George W. Bush, that you would have retirement in some kind of fund and health benefits in some kind of fund for the next 75 years. So the people haven't even been born, a lot of them, that's going to receive this money that's put aside for them whenever they start working for the postal system, which is insane. Systems. The entertainment system needs to be changed and corrected. There has been many situations where there has been 2 white leads. Touched by Angel is one specific incident that I know of personally. It was time for renewal of the contract. So the studio gave the 2 white angels a substantial raise, and Della Reese, who was the 3rd angel, they didn't want to give her anything. So the 2 white angels stood up for her, and then eventually she got the money that she deserves. So the entertainment industry has really depicted Black people not so wonderful most of the times. They've been portrayed as thugs or whores or buffoons or pimps. But then came along Black Panther, which was a game changer. The sports system. In 2015, Tom Brady, the infamous quarterback, was caught deflating footballs. And he was suspended for 4 games. Listen to this, 4 games. Colin Kaepernick, in 2016, the next year, hasn't played a game for kneeling since 2016. He didn't deflate any footballs. He didn't do anything illegal. He was kneeling because there was such a suffering of African Americans in his community because he played for the 49ers. And what is wrong with that picture? Then we have Michael Vick. He was accused of having dog fights in his backyard. He got 21 months in the federal prison. He went back, and then he still was a great quarterback after that. So is there any analogy in what the severe consequences of Black men in charge of a game that are quarterbacks getting such harsh treatment, and a person that was cheating, they get 4 games suspended? 71% of the sports fans, they really do support social justice issues. Mark Cuban stopped playing the national anthem months ago. There's the banking system. Only 44% of Black America owns property, as opposed to 74% that are white. Usually they get loans that are subprime, the interest rates are high, there's an acceleration clause, the list just goes on and on and on. The most worrisome situation was what happened when an appraiser went into a Black couple's house and appraised their home for $500,000 less than the next appraiser when they took down all of the Black pictures of their family, and they got a $500,000 appraisal more than what the previous appraiser had given them. Corporation system needs to be addressed. And I still have a whole lot of other systems, but I don't want to belabor, but there's the tax system. We all know that the previous occupant of the house, of the White House, paid $750 in 2016 in taxes, and $750 in 2017, and paid nothing before or after that. So we have the policing system that needs to be corrected. We have the criminal justice system that needs to be corrected. We have the bail system that needs to be corrected. We have the, it's just on and on, the prison system. Why are the prisons here privatized? We have the immigration system that needs to be corrected. So in closing, if you are an educator, do something about the educational system. If you are in the medical system, do something about it. Whatever system that you're involved in or ever have been involved with, do something about it to eliminate biases and prejudice. And I know that that's challenging because we all have biases and we all have prejudices. No one is free until we all are free. Give yourself, your time, your wisdom, your infinite love. And so it is.